is Tom Cannon. This is Author Showcase, interview show where we talk to area writers around the Fox Valley, anywhere around Wisconsin really, and we have a great show for you today. My name is Tom Cannon. I am a poet and a writer, live right here in Oshkosh, and this is my friend Bill.
Hey Tom, I'm Bill Gillard. I'm a professor of English at UW Oshkosh. Live in Appleton. Happy to be down here talking to writers on Author Showcase.
And today we have DG Clearing.
Hey everybody, it is so good to be here. It's quite the honor. I look forward to just a great interview and sharing some of my poems and words with you.
It will be. And just a little bit about DG. He's a writer, poet, and a visual artist, as well as a performance artist. He lives in Northeastern Wisconsin. DG's poems and his art derive from a constant search for the expose the truth in the world around us. His poems have appeared in various anthologies, documentary poetry films, media outlets including USA Today, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Green Bay Press-Gazette, and others. He was chosen to be a representative for the Wisconsin in 2020 National Poetry Month by the Council of Wisconsin Writers. In 2023, he was a regional judge for the National Poetry Out Loud competition, and he's an ongoing ambassador for Wisconsin. DG coined the phrase the pandemic poets and is one of the founding members of the Norwegian Poets Cafe's pandemic poetry movement, and we want to know more about that. But first, we're going to start out with DG reading one of his poems. Take it away, DG.
You know, we're all from Wisconsin. I think we all have our favorite bartender. This is my bartender. Standing at the bar, she pours another sin into my glass, shooting one back herself, in her raspy voice saying thanks, as I tell her my half-truths and lies. Like a dancer, she works the bar, flirting with the men, making small talk with the women, scooping all the change and bills in front of her as tips. She leans in front of me, remembering my name, looking at me with those big brown eyes and a smile that takes all my pains away. Then asks if she could buy me another. Pounding the jigger of Jack and a beer, she walks away in her jean skirt and cowboy boots, pointing her finger at me like I'm the only one in the room. The dance goes on, falling in and out of love with her over and over again. And at the end of the night, she leans into me, giving me a kiss on the cheek, and says, "Last call, Jack," with a wink. As the lights go up, she walks away and through the door.
Very, very nice. Excellent. Good. And as you can tell, if you hear DG performing his poetry, he's not just going to be reciting it, he will be performing it. And
So, yeah, fascinating. How have you grown into yourself as a performer? Because all of us start off just, terrified, going like hiding behind the sheet, in our first public reading. How have you grown and developed and found yourself and found your voice as a performer's voice?
I've been an artist my whole life. I was a visual artist for many years and still do visual arts, and was a performance artist for many years in Minneapolis and New York, and still do performance art in this area. There's two things about poems. There's two things about poetry. It's what you see written on a page and how you read it, and then there's actually about what the artist, what the writer actually wants, and that's the opportunity for a writer or a poet to actually express the the auditory meaning of what a poem is meant to be. You know, as far as my poems, I've always, when I've performed them, I've always performed them. I've never read my poetry. I go to a lot of readings. I hear people read their poem, you know, and it's just a reading. They don't put the meaning of their poem into the reading. I prepare a lot for my poems, you know. I prepare a lot when I came here or any other reading. You know, when you stand in front of an audience, standing in front of an audience is performing. You know, standing in front of an audience and just reading is just reading. You know, if you listen to like NPR with you know, the reading of their books, you know, an incredible series they have. You know, those readers, you can hear them perform in their voice. You know, they take on a character. You know, I take on a character. You know.
Have you ever been tempted to put stage directions into your, because I have been at some point too, like read this quietly or don't read this part aloud, you know, anything like that, the way a dramatist would.
And I have done that.
Oh, you have? Good.
Yeah, I have done. You know, I performed at the Widener Center a couple years ago for the Fringe Festival, which was a group of fringe artists and performers.
Sure, yeah.
You know,
that's a great
kind of a nice honor to get that. Very exciting. You know, and I still do that. I still do stage performance as far as when I'm reading. Yeah, I like to walk around. You know, I like to stand up. A few weeks ago, I used a blowhorn in one of my performances.
Yes, you did.
Recently, I've started recording backgrounds of myself reading poems, and then using another poem as the front. You know, so there's a recording of the poem going on in the back, and then there's me reading in front, both having similar meanings, which is, you know, pretty exciting. Yeah.
Yes. But so preparing is absolutely good advice for anybody. Prepare, read that poem many times so that you do have the confidence to do it. But also, you still take chances. Is that something that you've practiced, or is that just kind of built into you to take those chances?
Artist chances.
Yeah.
You know, expressing what's out there in everyday life, may it be the flower growing, or may it be the political state that we're in at any given point. You know, you have to take chances to do that. You know, people don't like that. There's a lot of people that don't like that. They get upset that you're saying things. You know. But that's what poetry is. Poetry is rawness. You know, writing is rawness. When everything else fails, you know, the poet tells the truth. You know, and I think you can go back in history and look at that the poet tells the truth. You know, why do societies have poets? You know, because they tell the truth. You know, when everything else fails, you know, look at the poems. You know, art tells the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, and going around to different open mics and poetry events, it's really coming more to the forefront that there is more truth being told, more poems about the topic, and you know, something I've struggled with too, especially when I was the poet laureate of Oshkosh. I'm like, well, I don't want to take too strong of a stance because what do I know? I may be wrong, but I think it's what your truth is, and you should express it. But I didn't want to express it because if I say something and a taxpayer's like, that's not my opinion, but why are you representing me? And I understand that. What do you think, Bill?
It's always hard to try to figure out how any piece of writing will be received, and for me, I mean, it's so difficult that I ignore it.
That's the best thing to do is just write what you want to write.
Right. Yeah. If you start taking all the many variables into account with your guesses for what's going to happen today, tomorrow, a year from now with this piece of writing, I don't know if you'd ever get words on a page. And so, taking the chance, and it's not really necessarily taking a chance. It's just saying, here I am.
Yeah, and part of that is you're documenting history. You're poet. As a poet, you're also a historian. History always is written by the victor. But a poet can just write what it is. Can write both sides of it. And that's a difficult thing to do.
Sure.
I go quite a few readings, quite a few open mics, and I can always tell when there's a little tension with people when I read. I look at the audience, I look at the other poets, I try to interact with the audience either with my eyes or sometimes I'll walk right into the crowd
with a bullhorn.
With a blowhorn or without a blowhorn.
Out onto the street with a bullhorn.
Oh yeah, I walk out on the street with a blowhorn too. But that interaction, you got to be brave. And I've performed long enough, and I've been in the arts long enough that. Not that I don't get nervous when I go out to perform or when I read, because I do. Because I think when you lose that little bit of fear or that lot of fear, you just shouldn't be doing it any longer. I want to share my art. I used to love to share my art in exhibitions. And had lots of exhibitions. I like to share my art now, which is my writing, is my poetry. With an audience. And God, I wish I was so confident that I didn't need people's approval. But I like people's approval.
Of course.
And when I don't get that, I still continue writing what I write. Mm-hmm. I don't stop writing, because the audience didn't like it. It's like, how do you write? That thought process. That thought process. It's like magic.
Sure. And the risk taking too, and an item that Tom mentioned as part of your bio. A couple months back, I was at Ripon High School, and I was a regional judge for the Poetry Out Loud.
Oh, great!
And there I was with these kids, these beautiful young kids, taking a risk. It's not their poetry. What they do, these kids, they memorize someone else's poem,
right?
And they stand in front of a room. It's full of parents and teachers and schlubs like me who are, pen in hand, looking at, ready to judge them.
Yeah.
And they recite their poems.
It's so exciting.
And some of them are very nervous, and you could tell.
Right.
Others are a little less nervous, more excited. But tell me what you learned from your experience with Poetry Out Loud.
I was asked to be a judge. Tom was actually there with me. Was a judge at the same time. And you have these young adults, these young adults who are taking a risk that most of the school doesn't take. Most of the school doesn't. They go play sports. And some people do theater, but to read in front of people, to do poetry, and if you're a boy, probably getting teased because you're reading poetry. If that program was available when I was in high school, I would have been part of it. I was in theater when I was in high school, and I used to hear about how I was in theater, and I wasn't a great athlete. I was the last one to get picked on a team, once I came in third in a track meet, cross country, I was always the last person, but I loved my theater. And was willing to take the risk to do that. And I grew up in a farming community, so theater really wasn't part of the farming community, though they had a beautiful theater in the school. And these kids were doing that. They were putting themselves out there. They were expressing their voices. They were telling the school. They were telling their community, about words, about thoughts, about things. Some of the poems that I heard, for a 13 to 17-year-old were pretty advanced for them reading, and I really wasn't sure if they were comprehending what they were reading, but they said them with such passion. Their coaches, had such passion in teaching them. I went down to the state finals down in Madison and saw the young woman who went on from Ripon to that, along with other kids from the state, young adults. They're not kids, they're young adults, and it was so exciting.
Everybody under 40 is a kid.
They're young adults.
Okay, I'm
part of them getting up and doing that,
yes,
is the beginning of the change of their life, and they're not kids,
Right.
They're young adults, and I always treat young adults with respect, and they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to have wins, and they're going to have lots of fails, but poetry out loud, they're willing to risk that,
Yes. My big lesson was, and it's like something I repeat to myself as often as I can, like, don't back away. Do that thing that scares you.
Right.
Do that thing that makes you nervous.
Right.
Do that thing, you might fall flat on your face. You got to do it, because the alternative is not a happy thought.
Right.
You backed away from something that made you, vague. You're not fighting in a war, right? Like you're backing away from something because you might be uncomfortable. No, that's not the person I want to be. And I learned, I was so inspired by those kids, by those young adults who were in front of me, and struggling, thriving, the whole range.
Right.
And some, kind of succumbing to nerves, whatever. I was inspired by every single one of them, because that's me, and I admire them, the guts to stand up in front of their peers.
Right.
In a totally voluntary situation. This wasn't like a final exam and poetry recital where you're required by law to try No, you could have stepped away at any moment, but you followed through, and here you are, and you're taking your shot.
Right. You have those same feelings, Tom? Or?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that young people have access to that creativity that we kind of lose, and so they're just able to access it and display it. And unfortunately, when we did it, they were talking about how poetry out loud is kind of dying out a little bit in the state. I think because poetry is not that popular, but also because there's so many more demands, so many extracurricular activities that are taking the young people away from it. But like you said about history, it is history. And so when those kids are reading those poems, they are accessing history, personal history, but also history of our culture.
Exactly.
And so that really struck me, and I agree that, poetry, history is important, but people get lost in the facts and the places and the times. But poetry accesses just the important things. Who was there? How did it make them feel? What did they have to go through?